Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the latest episode of the 1871 podcast. It's myself, Johnny Hunt, presenting this evening, and our guest is ex-Reading goalkeeper Steve Mautone. And apologies in advance, I'm going to have a co-host, my daughter Edie Rose, maybe join us at some stages, but she talks more sense than me, so we'll stick with it. So Steve, good evening, welcome. How are you?
I'm very well, thanks, and thanks for having me on the show, mate. I appreciate it.
Pleasure. So going back, Steve, back to the good old days, how did the move to Reading come about in '97? You were at West Ham.
Yeah, I was at West Ham. I just had a little bit of a loan stint, probably a few months before. I actually had a loan stint with Crewe Alexandra.
Yeah.
And I was called back early because at the time Ludo McCosco was the goalkeeper at West Ham, and he'd got injured. So I was meant to stay at Crewe for about 3 months, and ended up staying a week. I played 3 games there in a week, and got called back and had a taste of first team football. Knew probably my future wasn't with West Ham. It probably wasn't going to be, knocking Ludo off the number 1 spot. He's a legend of the game and legend at West Ham. So I approached my agent, who was Barry Silkman, and just said to him, look, I need to just play more games and put myself out there. I'd done quite well, both for West Ham and for Crewe. So at the time, Bobby Mihailov was the keeper. He'd just done his knee. Silky said to me, look, the guys are going to come down from Reading and watch one of your reserve games, So I remember he said, look, they need a keeper who's commanding, who talks a lot, who organises. He goes, and I don't know if you've ever met Silky or heard Silky talk. He's very, East London. He goes, listen, whatever you do, just scream. Mate, I was screaming it. I was telling the left back to tuck in. The left back wasn't even there. He was up the field. So I was just screaming for the sake of screaming. And it obviously worked because, they took me on loan, and then from there I, played some games on loan and then ended up signing.
And how was it? I remember that season when you came in. You helped keep us up under Jimmy Quinn, Mick Gooding, wasn't it? How was that when you came into the change room ready? Did you know anyone, or did you have any kind of contacts there?
No, I only knew Andy Burnell just from being Australian. Yeah. I didn't really know him personally, but to have a familiar face and someone that I'd met before and spoken to before and knew was very good for me to come in. But as a footballer, especially in Aussie, traveling around, I played in Italy when I was 16, and you get used to going into change rooms and sort of sitting back and sussing out who the alpha males are and working out, where you sort of sit amongst the core group. But I didn't know anyone. Nobody really knew me. And the good thing was that the games just started straight away, thick and fast. Change rooms are a really interesting dynamic because I've been in change rooms like West Ham where, I was a first team. I was sitting on the bench for almost a season. But until I played my first game, I was never really respected by the boys. You're always sort of on the outer. So coming from a Premier League team down to a championship team probably made it easier for that sort of respect. But being able to play straight away was always a benefit, and you get people get around you, especially when you do reasonably well as well. People get around you a little bit more and are accepting. So that was. What
was your impressions of Elm Park? I know West Ham's old ground's a bit similar, but probably a little bit of an upgrade. What did you think of the place?
Yeah, look, I don't know. It doesn't stick in my mind that, and it was a long time ago, by the way, but it doesn't stick in my mind that it was a big culture shock. I'll tell you what sticks in my mind more was going on loan to Crewe. I mean, that was an eye opener, Yeah. So I probably had a little bit of a baptism of fire there. and then was probably used to expecting the worst because uh, when I went up to Crewe, that happened while I was travelling with the first team. We were playing Leeds away, and the night before the Leeds game, the management pulled me in and said, "Look, you got a chance to go on loan. We really want to see you play. You're going to sit on the bench for us this tomorrow, and then you're straight up to Crewe. You're playing Sunday, and this is like a Saturday. So Friday night, ready to play Saturday, straight up there Sunday, and it happened that quick that the only hotel that had any availability in Crewe was only like a broom cupboard, I reckon they had, So they stuck me in this thing. The bed was lumpy. It had no windows. I swear it was like, it must have been like a storage cupboard. They just threw a fold-away bed in there, And that was a bit of a culture shock. So coming to Elm Park, it wasn't too bad. And the atmosphere was quality, like you didn't need a lot of people there to have a good atmosphere.
No.
And the first game we played was against Southend at home, and I think we won 2-1 or 3-1. I can't remember. Julesy scored an unbelievable goal, but so to have a win, it was probably only 8,000-9,000 people, but it was good atmosphere, and I was just happy playing,
Yeah,
I was just
tin roof.
Yeah, under that tin roof, yeah. So
you had some quality players there, didn't you, alongside you in that team? Even though we were struggling, we had like the players from the playoff that were still in the squad, leaders.
Yeah.
Who was the sort of standout characters in that team?
Look, Stuart Lovell he wasn't like a standout character, but he was sort of a solid, solid guy in the change rooms, and fairly stable. And it just seemed like a little bit seemed to revolve around him, like not that it was sort of one of the leaders in there. He actually took a backward step, but he seemed to just be involved in everything on and off the field. Parky was unbelievable. He was straight away, come over, and obviously he was the captain, come introduce himself and made me feel welcome.
Yeah.
And then you had like Michael Mika. Was it Michael Mika? Yeah.
Mika,
he was, yeah. Like I said, whenever I get in the change rooms, new crowd. I even do it now when I'm coaching and stuff. But you kind of sit back and you see who the characters are, who's taking the piss out of who or whatever. And he was definitely amongst it. He was always looking for an angle to wind someone up, So I knew to stay clear of him for a little bit until I got used to him. But Trevor Morley was there.
Class player
in the first year. Yeah. James Lambert, great player, great potential. Probably too good a player, too young. And he'd only just come back from Monaco, I think it was. So he was definitely a good player. And if you asked him, he told you he was a good player.
I think he still does.
He still does, yeah. I actually really liked him, and I got on well with him. But I saw a potential in him that probably, if he had sort of concentrated on his own performance instead of worrying about everyone else, probably could have done a lot more. But I don't know if you remember that goal he scored against
Forest.
Forest. That was actually my last game.
Oh, wow.
He was, he had that ability, So, and then there was Paul Holsgrove was there as well, and Julesy was in there, but then he left almost straight away. He went up to Wolves. Keith McPherson. So Julesy and Keith McPherson I just caught up with just recently as well. I was in the UK. Yeah, and had a laugh with them and a reminisce. So it was a good it was a really good change room, some good experienced players, and some good youngsters as well coming through as well. Yeah.
And then like that first season, you had Quinny and Gillian in charge, didn't you? How were they to work under as a player? You had different guys on that coming through, you had McGee and then they had Quinny.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Look, it was an interesting dynamic, I suppose, because being player managers or player coaches, I think it's always a tough job to balance the two. And I've experienced it here in Australia, where one of my good mates, Kevin Muscat, was a player at Melbourne Victory when I was coaching, and then he become manager. And you have to change. You have to separate yourself from being one of the leaders of the boys to being the manager.
Yeah.
And so I'm sure that their task was, and I didn't know them before when they were just players, but I'm sure their task was, immensely difficult for that point of view.
Yeah.
But I remember them being very professional, very, very good at what they were doing, and not really remember hearing any real murmurs of issues because they were player managers. So I think that, I thought they did a good job. They were probably unlucky. In hindsight, if you think about who took over from them, did they do a better job, worse job? I don't know. We ended up getting relegated the following year, so probably they did a worse job. But
yeah, Terry the Taxi, wasn't it? Terry Bullivant.
Terry Bullivant, yeah.
Yeah. What was he like to work under? He came in, didn't he, as a fresh and sort of new enough and coming manager?
No, it was. I actually made my West Ham debut against Terry and Barnet in a cup game. So he was. He just struck me as a very nervous guy. I can actually remember in a team talk, he almost lost his train of thought, and it just kind of bamboozled him, and he couldn't sort of get back on track. And but he knew his stuff. I just don't know whether he was manager material. That's all.
Yeah. It's a big step
probably
up,
what let him down. Yeah, I think so. I mean, he did well at Barnet. He was at Barnet right before he came to us, and I think he did reasonably well there. But Reading at the time, I suppose Reading was a big jump from Barnet. I mean, 2 years before, I suppose, where the club was almost at the top level, and Barnet, I think, were in the old third division or whatever it was, the League Two. And a small club, but he had experience around him. I mean, Alan Pardew wasn't an experienced manager, but he'd been around, played at big clubs and the highest level. And I can't remember the other assistant's name, but I think he spent some time in Spain, didn't he? With
you're trying to think who it was actually. Mine's got a blank.
Yeah, if you say his name, I remember. I just can't remember. He was an older guy, but. Like they had some experience, but I just don't think, Terry Bullivant had, I suppose, had that character. To be a manager.
Yeah.
Like I said, I think he was very knowledgeable. He knew the game, but I just don't know if he had that character.
So we had Linvoy Primus on with us a while back, and I think he came in under Terry, didn't he? And him and Carlos Saba, and there were two decent signings, weren't they? But it just didn't. That season it kind of faded away a bit, like Reading's season just gone, doesn't it?
This year, yeah. I don't think we ever really, and we had what's his name come in as well in the middle of the park, Ray Houghton.
Yes, that's right. Yeah,
was there as well. Yeah. Look, I don't remember us being terrible really in any games. We just, I don't know, I suppose didn't really win a lot. I mean, I got injured after I don't know how many games. I think it was November, December. I think I remember injuring my knee at training, and I thought I just tweaked it, and I kind of played for about 4 weeks with a sore knee, and eventually said, I said to the medical staff, it keeps swelling up a little bit. What's going on? We got scans, and that's when they discovered that I tore my cartilage, and the night that they told me was the night before we were playing either Stoke or someone like that, and I said, oh look, I've played on for 3 or 4 weeks with this bit of pain. I'll just keep playing, and it should be all right. End of the season, we'll do something about it. The next day in the warm up, it locked up on me. I couldn't move.
I remember that. I remember that game. Yeah.
Port Vale it was.
Yeah.
Away at Port Vale. Yeah.
So after that, Steve, did you play again for us? Because you went to the Majeski, didn't you? you were part
Yeah.
of the squad for?
No. Yeah. I was in the squad. I didn't. I sat on the bench a few times, but I never played again. And in fact, the like I was saying to you, the week before was the televised game against Nottingham Forest,
Yeah,
where we lost 3-1, I think it was, or 2-1, or 3-2. I can't remember now.
3-3 was in the end, wasn't it?
Oh, it was a 3-all. Oh,
Yeah,
that's remember what's his name? Stone Meston, an absolute sitter.
yeah, that's right.
But
Yeah,
yeah, but see, I had, although I had a little bit of pain in my knee, that game, it didn't, my knee just never phased me. But I remember it just swelled up a bit the next sort of that Monday, and I went and got checked out, or that weekend, and we had an away game at Port Vale, and that's where I remember coming out for a cross in the warm up, and my knee just, the cartilage must have just got caught in the wrong place and just locked up, and I actually never really recovered. Then after that, I kept tearing it. Then they operated on it. And I wanted to come back to Australia because there was a surgeon in Australia who was sort of a leading surgeon in knees, and I couldn't because of the insurance reasons. And then I ended up coming to Australia to do my rehab, and he just looked at my knee and said it's not, that they've tightened it up, but it hasn't worked. And got it redone virtually straight away. So I had like two reconstructions in the space of 3 months.
how does that impact on your mental health, Steve? Something like that, as a young player, and you're being told that that
Yeah,
sort of size operation.
yeah. Look, mental health was never really talked about, so I just got on with it.
Okay,
And
yeah.
like, how can I say it? Every time I'd actually tore my cartilage. I had a reconstruction back in 1990, so like 10 years before almost, right? And it was almost like, okay, right, I'm determined just to get back stronger than ever. Like I never thought about, like you never thought about how it's going to affect my mentally, how it's going to affect me or whatever. And there were probably days where I was gutted, depressed. And in fact, actually at the time, right, there was an offer come in for me from two offers, one from Wimbledon, one from Coventry, and the club said no, he's not for sale, and I said the usual thing, and I loved it. I loved it at Reading. Don't get me wrong, but when the Premier League club comes in for you, and they're bidding over £1.5 million or whatever it was at the time, you kind of think, oh, I want to try and get back into the Premiership, so. I remember talking with my agent about it, and he said, "Look, we think it's gonna, it could happen. They're really interested. Both clubs are really interested. It was Wimbledon and Coventry, and I had a really good season, right, and started off really well, and I remember my agent saying to me, just sit tight and I'll let you know. And then that the following week I got injured. He goes, don't worry, just get over the injury and we'll see what happens. And maybe we'll negotiate again with Reading if you don't want to leave, whatever. And I just never recovered. So that probably affected me a little bit, thinking I've missed that opportunity.
Yeah.
Hopefully there'll be another one around the corner. If it's not with Reading, it'll be someone else or whatever. And it just never happened. And I probably never thought about the end because I was always determined to keep going. And even, I ended up leaving Reading and I went up to Wolverhampton, and I had a 6-month stint there. I had about 4 months at Crystal Palace, and I ended up at Gillingham, and never really got going at any of the clubs because I probably needed another 6 months of rehab.
Yeah.
But my contract had run out. Tommy Burns had come in. They wouldn't extend my contract. They'd only give me a week to week, And as a footballer, week to week, you're going, man. I got bills to pay. And where Wolves had given me a 6-month contract, and I thought, well, that's better than week to week, and maybe I can build on it. But I was just never right again, Played a bit of non-league, but it's hard enough to be a footballer as it is, let alone, I think the last operation that I had was my 7th in the year and a half.
Wow.
On the same knee, and so it's hard enough trying to be a footballer, with a fit, able body, let alone trying to do it with 3 reconstructions and then probably another 8 operations under your belt, But
Jeez.
I gave it a go. I'm
Yeah.
paying for it now. I walk around with a bit of a limp, but I'll get
I was
over
going to
that.
ask
But
you, I was going to say, 20 odd years later, do you still have an impact on you? There you go. Right? Like it must.
yeah, it does. Yeah, unfortunately, it does. I'm actually trying to get some stuff sorted out, but look, I would never. People go, "Oh man, look what you've done." I would never give it up. If I knew this was the outcome and I had to start again, I'd start again and do exactly the same thing.
Yeah.
So I had the time of my life, mate. I was a kid who grew up on a country farm, in the outback of Australia. And to say that I've walked away with playing in one of the best leagues in the world, having a career that spanned over 17 years as a professional, and then following that coaching for 10, 12 years as a pro. Like I feel fortunate that I was given these opportunities, but I also worked pretty hard for it as well.
Yeah. And that, on the A League, how it's in the finals at the minute there. How the A League's progressed over the years? Like I was over there 2005 and watched how it started off, and so when you were coaching and watching Grant Brebner run around for victory, and all the ex-Reading connections that were going on at the time. Where do you think it is now? Where it's going for the future?
Look, it's definitely plateaued, and it's unfortunate because it kind of had a bit of a peak in the 70s and 80s, and then sort of died down a little bit. And then when the A League come in, I came back from the UK the year after the A League was formed, and I had a lot of skepticism. I thought it's going to just fall on its ass again. But then all of a sudden, Victory started getting some success. There was only one team in Melbourne, and we're getting crowds of 20, 30,000, and then all of a sudden we had this big blockbuster game against Sydney. We had 50-odd thousand people at a game, and I'm going, I can't believe this is Australian football. This is unbelievable. And it hit its peak, and then the Football Australia and the Australian government bid for the World Cup, right? So they bid for either Russia or Qatar. And the debacle that happened with that, I think they just got really gun shy. And I think they were hanging their hats on hosting a World Cup, and that's the ultimate goal. And that's why we're driving this football league and we're spending all this money. And they had a big backer who was this guy who set up Westfield Shopping Centres. So I think you got Westfield in the UK. And he had a big passion, and he was actually involved in the 70s setting up the old National League as well. And he kind of, took a backward step, but they all got burnt from bidding for these World Cups, and both financially and I think emotionally. And what I noticed, whether it's just me noticing it as a coincidence or whether it actually was the case, I don't know. But I just noticed that, the foot got taken off the pedal. And there wasn't as much marketing in the local game. We weren't attracting as many, bigger named marquee players, and it's just slowly dying a slow death. It's a shame, really, but it's just seems to be really, really at an interesting point, a little bit of a crossroads. I hope it doesn't go down the road of sort of falling over, but they need to do something. I don't know what that is. The only thing I can think is that we don't get a lot of government support, and that's really what we need.
Yeah, I see. Because you see, Andy Manel's at the Central Coast Mariners now, isn't he? He's got a role there.
Oh, is he?
Yeah.
I didn't
delighted.
Even know. Yeah.
I think I don't know what he's doing there, but so they've done very well this season. But I saw you were back in Reading a little while back for a game. How was that for you? When was the last time you were back before that?
Yeah. So I came back in 2015 with my whole family, and I managed to get to a game. And that was when Yap Stamp just took over. It was his first game of the season, actually. And that was great. And then my son, who's 14 now, he's loving his football. He's a keeper as well. He's only just started being a keeper. And
brainwashed him.
And yeah, well, I say to everyone, I never pushed him, but when he was about 2 or 3 months old, he used to have the iPad in front of him watching goalkeeper clips. So it's probably subconsciously it was in there. And he used to hang out with me when he was a little fellow and at training and stuff when I was coaching at Victory. So, and whenever we had a bit of spare time, I'd sort of, kick a few balls at him and that. So he always loved it. But like all kids, he wanted to be a striker. But now he's become a keeper and he's doing really well actually. So he's playing in sort of the higher level of junior football here in Melbourne. And he also got involved in this touring group that's associated with West Ham. So we had 2 weeks over in the UK at the start of April, where he played some games and trained, and we went and watched some games. And one of the games was that this tour group had organised was going to watch QPR play somebody, I can't remember who it was now. And I noticed that Reading were playing Burnley at home. So, we sort of split from the group. And Ronnie Grant,
just the fake hoops.
Yeah, no, that's right, the fake hoops. So Ronnie Grant got in touch with me, and he runs the Ex-Players Association, and he said, "Look, we'd love for you to come to the game and bring your son along." And he goes, you can go and we'll get you up in a director's box, but if you don't mind having a Q&A in one of the rooms or whatever. So I said, yeah, I loved it, and it was a great day. My boy walked away going, "Oh, today was the best day ever,"
Oh wow!
And we actually went and watched Man City and Bayern Munich when we were up in Manchester, and I thought that was the best day. But he goes, no, today's the best day, and it was great because Ron actually took my boy aside and sort of didn't show him around the stadium, but sort of took him outside and said, your dad, this is where your dad played, and this is what we thought of him when he was there. So he kind of got a bit of an insight.
Oh wow!
It's not just dad telling him how good I was.
Somebody else actually could say it as well.
yeah. So and he kind of saw a club like Reading, who probably from a distance you think, they're just a whatever, but going into the Majestic, still impressive stadium.
Yeah.
And he goes, "Oh, Dad, this is fancy. We're in the director's box and having lunch." He goes, "This is really fancy because we've got some big plates but little food." So he loved it, and it was great. It was great for me to catch up with a lot of different people I hadn't seen for a long time. And then I managed to have a drink with Julksy and Keith McPherson as well, which was good because I think Keith's son's at Reading.
Oh, wow.
In their 15s, yeah. So
is he a defender like his dad, or as well?
No, he's not. I don't think he's a defender. No. But it was good. It was good because I spent a lot of time in Reading. Even after I'd finished playing, I sort of stuck around for a couple of years and was involved in a couple of different business ventures. And to go back and catch up with some friends who I still keep in touch with now was really good. Enjoyed it. Yeah.
And what did you make of on the pitch? I know that game was a decent game for Noel Hunt, but the relegation. What have you made of Reading's troubles over the last few years? Have you been following?
Yeah, I have been following. Sometimes it's hard to get really into the nitty gritty of what's going on. I sort of get on the social media side of things. I sort of catch up with some news, but that's more fans' views and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But I don't know the exact ins and outs, but I know they were punished by the financial fair play rules, which in the end I think cost them, right?
Yeah.
I mean, when that sort of stuff happens, even though you may be sort of mid-table struggling, I know what it's like when you're down the bottom. You seem to get sucked down even harder, and nothing goes right for you. Whereas if they were in a sort of a safer place, maybe the rub of the green kind of changes a little bit for you.
Every game went against us at the end. We went, "Oh, please, can that team beat that team?" Nope. And you just went, "There's not to be. I'm not to run out."
No, that's right. And I think Noel, I remember in that game, Noel and his crew did really well, and I thought that they really were positive, and really gave it to a good team like Burnley, who play good football, which is a really strange thing to say when you're referencing Burnley, but they've got a decent manager, but I thought they play well. But and then it was just, I don't know, they were just unlucky in the end, I think. And hopefully they can regroup and bounce back up straight away and live to fight another day, because they're certainly viewed differently, I think, after their stint in the EPL. They're viewed as one of the bigger clubs in the championships, whereas I think prior to that they were always probably seen as a small fish hanging in there in the championship,
Yeah.
So it'd be good to see them back up there, but
it's a big challenge, isn't it? Like, so the last time was when you were at Reading, we got relegated to League One as it is now, isn't it? Yeah. So like it's kind of gone full circle, wasn't it? Because the way the club went after sort of the move to the Majewski and the getting to the Premier League, and now it's almost like a start again, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's really interesting. Tottenham's going through it at the moment. I think whenever there's instability, in off the field, it just seems you just can't seem to avoid it on the field. Like obviously with the financial fair play and the owners, and I don't know exactly all the stories, but I was hearing rumours that things weren't right and previous owners, and I even heard the mention of Russians, which I never knew about. And
so that's it where it started to go wrong.
Yeah, I've been involved even here in Australia at a club where at board level there's a bit of instability, and it just seems to push over onto the field, even though you might never even see them day to day. But when you've got a board and a director and a chairman who's stable and functional, and like probably what Majewski was like when he was bringing everyone in and holding everything together, it just success seems to almost follow that, But then it's vice versa as well,
Yeah, I think the clubs, with the embargoes and not being able to do proper transfers, and it's just been, we've hung around for the last few years, managed to stay up, and then you just kind of you feel like it's kind of run out of luck time, and now we're where we're at, but that's football, isn't it?
No, that's right. That is football, and that's the beauty of the whole, setup in English football. Like in Australia, we don't have promotion relegation because there's not enough money. There's not enough clubs who financially could handle it. You go to play an away game and it costs you an absolute fortune. You got to fly, 25 players halfway across the country, stay 2 nights in a hotel. Like clubs couldn't get promoted and then try and sustain that. So you get a level of falseness in games because clubs are can't get into the top part of the to get into Champions League or win cup games and things like that. So in the end they're just fielding kids and it just becomes crap. So I think the excitement of promotion relegation is what makes our game the beautiful game right all over the world. And sometimes, it's not a bad stabilizer where it's kind of, everyone sort of goes, okay, all right, now we're in League One. Let's see, what are we now really got to do to get back up there? Because like you're saying, you're kind of hanging around is a little bit false. Maybe planning with, in the back room of the offices wasn't getting done the right way because they were just in survival mode, and that maybe now they can sort of, you've seen it many times where clubs get relegated, then relegated again, and then it takes them a couple of years, and then they come back and they're doing better than ever.
Momentum, isn't it? It's a lot to these things. What's your life like now, Steve? Coming sort of full circle. What are you up to these days?
Yeah, look, I consider myself as a career coach, right? So I coach full time. I was coaching at Victory. I was running my own academy and getting involved in youth stuff. And I've got 3 kids, right? So I got twins who are 14 and a 12-year-old. And what I found was, like I said to you, in an away game, we would travel. I'd leave the house at 6 a.m. on a Friday. I wouldn't get home till midnight on a Sunday after, for an away game. And then by the time you get back to work, and I was hardly seeing the kids, right? And then when my kids started getting involved in sport, my son in football, my daughters in basketball and swimming and all that. I was just missing everything, you know. And I spent 10 years at Victory, had some success, and I've always been a sort of not worried about trying to try different things, you know. I'm a bit of an entrepreneur. I do a bit of property. I've got businesses, and so I thought, you know, I want to try and dedicate some time to my kids, just like my dad did for me, and help me, you know, with my career. So I left the professional coaching, and I set up a business doing apparel. So I now supply apparel to both professional and semi-professional and amateur sporting clubs. Mainly football, but you know, I do some volleyball, basketball. I had the contract for the national team for volleyball for about 4 years, and yeah, and then, you know, like COVID come in and destroyed everything for us, and it kind of forced me to change a little bit. So my business also now does workwear, corporate wear, all that sort of stuff, and you know, I dabble in a lot of different things. So, you know,
enjoying life,
doing a bit of enjoying life. But in saying that, my son went to a club, and they're an amateur club, but they're sort of at that higher level of state competition here. They call it the Nationals Premier League. And I went there as a dad. I said to him, mate, I'm not getting involved. You go there, trial. I don't want them to see me, or, you know, I don't want an influence at all. And he got a you know, got a spot in the team there, and they lost their academy director, and I just saw it was starting to, you know, go pear-shaped. So I put my hand up to help as academy director, and you know, I've gone from that. That's why I said 10 o'clock's great, because I had a coaches meeting tonight. Now I'm working every day after my own work. I go there and, you know, I run the club with all the coaching and put the programs together, and I'm really enjoying. I must admit, I'm really enjoying it. It's just that, you know, it just means I've got to sacrifice a couple of other things. But so I'm back into coaching for I only really didn't coach for maybe a year, so I'm back into coaching now.
Brilliant.
Enjoying it.
And lastly, just one, what was would be your fondest memory looking back at your time at Reading? What would be the one thing for you?
Man, walking out on a sunny day pre-season against Chelsea. That you know, like, there was probably 17,000 people there. The place was rocking. I just remember it as a beautiful day, and it was just, it was like it gave me a warmth that maybe gave me. That's probably, that day probably made me connect with the Reading Football Club.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It was Elm Park. It was what it was.
Yeah, I was there.
A level. Sorry?
I was there at that game. I remember that one.
Yeah, you remember it. I don't know. I just remember looking over as we walked out to the left, as we walked out of the tunnel to the left, and I can't remember what they used to call that side, but that, you know, behind the goals, it was standing room only. It was packed, the Tyler stand, and the singing and everything. It was just a buzz, and it was almost like, it was, because it was only a year or maybe a bit longer than a year where Reading nearly got promoted, right? It was almost like, this is what it would have been like if we were in the, you know, like, cause Chelsea were a big team, some big players as well, and I don't know, that's, if I think about a fond memory, like, that day just sticks out in my mind. It's like a day I'll never forget. Also because, you know, I have an Italian background, so there was some big Italian players in that team.
Zola was playing, wasn't he?
Zola scored 2 goals. But he scored a lot. Now, I'm actually proud to mention that, because he scored against far better keepers than me, so I'm okay with that, you know. But, you know, Di Matteo was playing, you know, national team, Zola, Vialli.
Wow.
And these guys here, you know, I kind of idolized as Italian national team players, and I'm on the same park as them. But it's just, you know, like, it's the whole thing of the town buzzing. I remember walking out, there wasn't a cloud in the sky. It was just a beautiful day, and it was just a great atmosphere as well, you know. So, and I know it just felt like everyone enjoyed it. And, I don't know whether it was that game, but I ended up going across the road to the pub. What was it called? The
Spread Eagle?
Spread Eagle or something.
Yeah,
The
yeah.
Spread Eagle there.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I went after the game. I went in and had a drink, and it was brilliant. Like it was just you know, like I kind of felt it made me almost feel like I was at home. You know.
Oh,
So
brilliant.
that's probably my fondest memory. Yeah, it's good.
Oh, excellent. Well, a great way to finish up. Steve, thanks so much for your time. I
Yeah.
know it's late over there for you. You probably need to get to bed. But it's been a
No
pleasure.
problem. No, I got some sessions I got to plan for tomorrow, mate. So I'm still working, mate.
Lovely.
No, all good. Hey, I really enjoyed it, and sorry, I remember I was meant to be on a while back, and I missed it and whatever. But I really appreciate the chance to get on and have a chat, and you know, and it's probably great that it's followed on from my recent visit as well. You know.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks so much for your time, Stephen. Just to let folks know, this episode will be out this evening on the YouTube channel as we have now, and also on the Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. So thanks again, Steve, and have a good day, everyone. Cheers.
No problem. Go the Royals.
Cheers, Steve. You're a star, mate. Thanks so much again.
No,
really nice speaking to you again.
You too. All the best.
Take care, Steve. Bye, mate. Bye-bye.
Cheers, mate. Bye.